Hi friends, it's Dr. Russ. Happy summer. I want to talk a little bit today about our emotional experience and what do we do when it's difficult? How do we handle that? So I hope you're comfortable and lying down or sitting somewhere. Maybe you can close your eyes, not driving, and let's get started. So I do invite you to close your eyes and just tune into your body. And that means your senses. So what do you hear? What's the temperature of the air? What does it feel like? The weight of your body on whatever you're sitting or lying on. We want to tune into those sensations. That brings us to the present. Most of our brain is actually taken up with sensation, particularly sensation from inside of our body. And our emotional experience, as well as our mental experiences, just grows out of that. We are very complex beings with very complex nervous systems and memories, and our emotional experience is generally rooted in our past. And we learn to interpret our present experience through the lens of our past experience. There's no way around that. You can't change it, and you shouldn't try. It's part of being human. But what we can do is bring as much of our attention as possible into this moment by focusing on our sensations. That's the essence of mindfulness practice. So as we're tuning into our body and feeling what we're feeling and smelling what we're smelling and hearing what we're hearing what we're hearing, funny little Freudian slip there, let's just notice, is there anywhere that's particularly tense? Having a hard time relaxing. That could be your face, your jaw, the base of your skull here, your occiput, where the neck meets the shoulders, the chest, the middle back. A lot of folks holding a lot of tension in the rib cage and the diaphragm, in the abdomen, the pelvic floor, the deep, deep pelvic floor, the hips, hamstrings, the thighs, the calves, and the feet. And notice sometimes when I'm walking around that like my feet are tense, almost like I'm gripping the ground. I try to remind myself that I am not about to be flung into space, that gravity's got me. I don't actually need to hold on so tight. So in our first scan through our body, we're not changing anything. We're just noticing. And a big part of what I want to talk about today is just the acknowledgement of the tension that we feel and the difficulty that we have, and try and understand it and come at it with a sense of compassion and curiosity, certainly without judgment for ourselves. And it's interesting to find that just the process of asking the question, how do I feel, with curiosity, will often actually start to dislodge tension and stuck emotion. Approaching with curiosity, empathy, and a desire to live freely and fully in our experience. That's what we want. So as you are listening to my voice, hopefully you're relaxing and tune into the places in your body where you feel tense, or there's pain, or fatigue, or any unpleasant feeling. And just look at it. Just shine the light of curiosity on this space in your body, in your mind, and see, what does it feel like? That's the curious question. This in and of itself is healing. Some people think that when you're healed, you're enlightened, you'll never be sad again, say goodbye to anxiety, say goodbye to sadness and depression. That's not true. That's really not even a desirable outcome. Sadness, even depression, anger, these are all valid parts of the human experience. And we want to experience the human life in its full richness and complexity. That's what I want. Simply the process of sitting or laying down, relaxing with the intention to understand and get to know our experience more and embrace and be curious about our hard feelings and our tension. That's healing. Another great quote from Buddhism, Shunryu Suzuki said, number one, he said, when you're enlightened, don't expect that you'll feel any different. I always like that. And the other is, strictly speaking, there are no enlightened people, only enlightened actions. So exchange the word healing or relaxation or present moment or mindfulness for the word enlightenment. It's all the same thing. So what we're doing right now is healing. Just looking, asking the question, what does this feel like? And let's say you've got a stuck spot in your body and there's a feeling there like anger, anxiety, sadness. The first thing I want you to do is get curious and ask yourself, what actually does this feel like? We have names for our feelings like anger and sadness, but let's get past the label and see, well, what actually does this feel like? I know when I'm sad, when I'm feeling sadness, I can feel like a heavy weight hanging by like a steel thread from my throat into my belly. It's a very distinct feeling of sadness. What does that feel like for you? There's no right, there's no wrong. It's just, what is it? Can you describe it more than labeling what the feeling would be, or what you would have to tell someone if they said, how are you feeling right now? And by the way, it's totally valid if someone says, how are you feeling right now? How are you? To say, I got a tightness in my chest. It feels like static on the radio. Or I can't let go of my jaw. It feels like there's a cat has its claws in my jaw muscles and simply will not let go. That's great if you can attach words to it. And if you can't, that's okay too. Maybe you're more visual. Maybe you're more of a kinesthetic person. Try and get beyond the label into what actually is this feeling. And then the next question is, well, what is underneath it? Because a wise person once told me, your first reaction to a situation is usually not the genuine one. It's the one you've been conditioned to have. And I hope you're watching if you remember that quote. So we got to get a little bit deeper than our conditioning and what we think we're supposed to feel and get into what we actually feel. Because we are not here to justify our feelings. We're not here to explain our feelings. We're not here to control our feelings. We want to learn about our feelings. And so what's underneath that? And I have found this little exercise to be really helpful. Let's say I notice that I'm feeling angry. And to me, angry feels like a gripped feeling in my stomach and in my throat. And I have the impulse when I feel angry to distance myself from that anger. And in so doing, unfortunately, I'm distancing myself from my experience and from myself. And I become harder to relate to in my relationships. And I become harder to understand for myself. And then it takes me some time to catch up. And I think I am this way. Again, this is rooted in my past because I did not have models as a child or especially as a young man for the healthy expression of anger, like what to do when you're angry. I've learned things since then, playing music, physical activity, dancing in particular. But the helpful thing is to dive in. So I was saying I might tend to distance myself and not want to feel this feeling. But actually what's way healthier is to imagine myself as a diver, and I dive into that ball of anger in my chest and in my throat. And I go all the way inside. And usually what I notice when I do that is that there's way more to it than just angry. I'm angry because I feel hurt. I'm angry because I feel the need to protect myself or someone in my family, someone that I love, someone's close to me. I feel angry because of cognitive dissonance. I am not the person who I thought I was. I have done something that has upset me. Another great teacher that I had, Dr. Chris Astle Smith, and we talked a lot about the emotional side of disease and the emotional side of health and healing. And he was very experienced and had worked with lots and lots of folks along these lines. And his favorite quote was, "Your only problem is you," which was hard to hear and hard to accept. But I have come to hear it and come to accept it. I might be mad about what's happening around me or what someone has done to me, for sure. But deep, deep down, it's essentially we are living our own life in our own body, experiencing the world through our own eyes and filtering it through the lens of our own experience and our own conditioning, and projecting, the movie of the world onto the inside of our forehead and watching it. And that's where 99% of the problems is with ourselves. So that's not to become, again, judgmental, because we're not judging ourselves, or that's not to get rid of empathy or compassion for ourselves, because we approach this work with empathy and compassion for ourselves. I think it's just kind of a funny truth about life. Most of the time that we are upset, we're projecting that upset from ourselves out into the world. And if we really dive deep into what we're feeling, we'll notice that we're really upset with ourselves. So as you key into your own body awareness and these areas that are troubling you, go deeper than the surface, right? Past the name into the physical sensation, and then try to allow yourself the courage to dive deep. Your emotions are never, ever, ever going to harm you. They won't. You are safe to dive deep and get deep into that space inside your body, inside your mind, where these difficult feelings are being experienced. This is doing the work. This is healing. And once you're in there, there's nothing that you need to do. You just say, okay, this is my experience right now, and I accept it. I embrace it. This is what it feels like to be me in this moment. And this feeling is like a cloud in the sky. The breeze is going to blow it right through if I allow it. And I'm going to allow that, because I know feelings are temporary, and that's a beautiful thing about them. So I hope you're feeling nice and relaxed and deep inside your body and experiencing whatever it is that this feels like for you right now. I presume that if you came to this video, you're looking for some soothing and some relaxation because you may be dealing with some stress or something difficult. But that's maybe not necessarily true. You might be feeling great. Things may be going really well for you. Wonderful. Really, really happy. My goal in my own work, personally, with myself, on myself, as well as with my patients and with anyone who cares to engage with these videos, is we want to show up as our best selves for ourselves, for our loved ones, for our family, for our community, for the world, because the world needs healing, and how the world heals is one person at a time from the inside out. Each person showing up the best they can every day. And your best is different every day. We're not always able to be as good as we were last Saturday or whatever it was. And that's okay. To just do the work, to understand yourself and know yourself so that you can express yourself. And when you get into that groove of expressing yourself honestly and fully in the moment, you really start to shine and you become an inspiration for the people around you. And I want to send my special love and acknowledgement to anyone who's watching or listening that is really stuck in a dysfunctional or abusive relationship or family, and you don't see a way out, or maybe your way out is some years down the road. I see you. I care for you. I invite you to reach out to me through the comments anytime. As you know, if you're watching, I try to respond to everybody. So I want to describe cognitive dissonance, which is what I think is often the root cause of many of our difficulties and getting stuck. So when I say your biggest problem is you, this is kind of what I'm talking about. So I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a counselor or social worker. I'm just a guy who's a chiropractor and has worked with human bodies and the tension that people accumulate and carry around with them for going on 26 years, and just sharing my experience. So take that for what it's worth. Cognitive dissonance to me is when we have conflicting thoughts, conflicting feelings, conflicting desires. We want two things and we can't have both of them. I want to have plenty of money, but I also want to spend my days walking in the woods. I don't know how to have both of those things. That creates tension inside of me. I think everybody experiences this to some degree. As I'm talking to patients over the years, I find this to be a common thread for people, humans of all walks of life. Sometimes cognitive dissonance doesn't come out from conflicting desires. It just comes out from conflicting thoughts. The world isn't what I thought it was. This person isn't who I thought they were, right? Sometimes in relationships, people do things that you don't expect, that let you down. And there's cognitive dissonance there. You're hurt because they're not the person that you thought they were, or you're hurt because the nature of the relationship isn't what you thought it was. Cognitive dissonance. You're going to have to reshape your mind into this new reality. Sometimes we don't want to. It takes work, time, and the byproduct of that is hurt or anger or grief and sadness. And then, of course, the bottom line there is I'm not the person that I thought I was. I have disappointed myself. Sometimes even our self-disappointment shows up as like leaving a difficult interaction and thinking about what you should have said or could have said. That's cognitive dissonance. I'm not as snappy as I thought I was or I thought I should be. And there, another dimension of that is what we call self-recrimination, right? I did something that I don't like. And my version of who I think of myself and how I actually act is not congruent. And there's tension between those two things, who I think I am and who I actually am, or who I strive to be and who I showed up as today. And there's a gap between who I strive to be and who I show up as today. Something's going to fill that gap, right? If we're not conscious about putting empathy and understanding and compassion into that gap, then our brain is probably going to put something like disappointment, resentment, or blame, right? I'm disappointed in myself, or I resent or blame this other person for not allowing me to be the person that I want to be. That's BS. You just simply are who you are, and you don't always have the capability to show up as who you wish you were. That's just human life, and we have to deal with that. Another really big source of internal tension is frustration. Someone is trying to achieve something they think they should be able to achieve, and they are not able to do that. They're not having success. That's frustrating. And then also, as I said before, I cannot have everything I want. I cannot spend the day sitting by a river, listening to the water flow down the rocks, and also have money and a house and go out to eat and have a car and take vacations and stuff. So that's frustration. Sometimes cognitive dissonance comes from what I call unwanted revelation. New information comes to light about the world or about ourselves or a loved one that conflicts with what we thought or believed. And we don't like this new information. We don't want to accept it. So on a subconscious or sometimes conscious level, we just pretend that it doesn't exist. And that only works for a little while. You cannot keep that up. There's this great quote from Emerson. It says, "The mind, once stretched by a new idea, never returns to its original dimensions." And I think that's true. You can't unsee something. You can only pretend that you didn't see it. So how do we reconcile cognitive dissonance? And I just want to remind you, I hope that you are relaxed and deeply concentrating on the sound of my voice and the feeling inside of your body. I'm hoping that we're able to help you achieve that state of relaxation through my little talk here today. So the way that I like to deal with cognitive dissonance, number one, is just acknowledge it, as I have said. Okay, cognitive dissonance. You are an essential, basic truth of human existence. We think things as humans. That's what we do. And we think we're right. That's another thing that we do. Well, we're not always right. For one thing, we don't always have all the information, and for another thing, the world changes. Sometimes something that was right before becomes wrong, and we need to change what we think. We need to just allow this dissonance to be, because it's the tension and the resistance that really often creates the emotional upset and gets us stuck in the moment, in the past. We want to continue to fight this battle in our brain when the world has moved on. Time doesn't stop to allow you to decide yes or no. Time keeps going. We want to be in the flow. And I want you to, again, with empathy, you don't have to be right all the time. You don't have to show up as perfect ever, certainly not all the time. The dissonance is not the problem. It's the tension and the self-recrimination that becomes the problem. As always, bringing this back to the body, I'm always interested in the physical manifestation of that. And I see that tension, that mental, emotional tension, shows up in people's bodies all the time. And sometimes folks are mystified by how I can feel where the pain is in their body. It's really just a matter of the tissue texture feeling different from chronic tension. And then the next level of that is I don't even really need to know someone that well to tell when they're stressed, because they're holding their breath, or they're tied up really tight, or they're just kind of tight all over. And that's that physical manifestation of that internal tension. So again, as a body worker, just as me and my own experience and what works for me, is that we can address and release mental, emotional tension by addressing and releasing physical tension, because it works both ways. The physical tension is a manifestation of the emotional tension, but it's also an inroad. It's also a way that we can deeply affect our psyche through movement, through action, through touch, through breathing, and it works both ways. So it can be a beautiful, virtuous cycle where we feel like we're moving and we're moving through the world physically, and that dislodges the stuck feelings in our body and allows us to move through life emotionally as well and be present for the experience that we're having, to enjoy the sunshine, to connect with a fellow human through eye contact or touch, through sharing and vulnerability and love. And that's what I believe we all want. That's the healing that the world needs, is love, compassion, joy, and that starts inside. So I really appreciate you listening. And if you have fallen asleep, then welcome to Dream World. And if you're still awake, then I invite you to just lay here and relax and feel this circulation of blood and energy through your body, and praise yourself for taking the time and doing the healing, doing the work, because there are no enlightened people. There's only enlightened action, and you just did one. So this is Dr. Russ signing off, and really, really grateful to you for watching and listening. Bye-bye.